Hello, welcome to the presentation. Thank you for coming. Please just take a seat and be sure to add your names to the sign-in sheet, including your email. We'll be started in just one moment. Hello again, and welcome to this workshop on making Makerspaces work for you, where we'll be providing some tricks and tips for transforming Makerspace dreams into Makerspace realities, regardless of your community size or interest. Now, before we get fully into Makerspace development, I just want to get a sense of how many people have had previous experience with Makerspaces, or just a general understanding of the term Makerspace. Okay, looks about a 50-50 split. So to quickly review, a makerspace is at its most basic level a space to make things. Seems kind of obvious, no? But creation is an extremely expansive term. It covers arts and crafts, knitting, baking, woodworking, sewing, programming, painting, engineering, graphic design, and just so much more. However, the ultimate goal of a makerspace shouldn't be to produce stuff. Rather, it's about cultivating a maker's mindset, cultivating students' free thinking, problem solving, and collaborative learning skills. Okay, I hear some of you groan, but I don't want kids swinging hammers at 7 a.m. and forget touching. I've never even seen a soldering iron in my life. And that is totally fine. Not every school is equipped with the same level of facilities or will require the same level of equipment. But research has indicated that the key aspects to implementing a good makerspace is to form a community and to encourage and support the users through classes and supervision. And that having expensive equipment for high precision work seems not to be as important as motivating and empowering members of the community to build a culture. So with that in mind, let's check out some actual makerspaces and what elements they might have that can work for you. First, we should note that makerspaces are extremely variable. We'll be returning to the image on the right later on in the presentation, but for now, I'd like you to consider the question on a personal level. What is a makerspace to you? Does this fit that definition? Scholars who have previously noted trends in makerspaces have traditionally grouped spaces by grade level, depending on the activity expectations and the provided materials. However, for the purposes of today's workshop, we're going to be focusing on how makerspaces have been implemented in K-12 curricula and what lessons can be learned for developing our own makerspaces. So on this slide, what elements stand out to you? Maybe it's the amount of color, the roominess. I can tell you that this fairly robust makerspace is the American International School's Collaboratory and was designed for elementary school students. The constructors intentionally picked a large, wide-open space with plenty of natural light to cultivate an atmosphere of freedom and exploration. And although some of the materials may be hard to see, the projects on display clearly have mixed media elements with 3D structures on cardboard, aluminum foil figures, and an abundance of colored tapes, strings, pencils, papers, all of which are within arm's reach for the students, with low shelving and labeled materials in boxes near the floor. It's big, it's beautiful, and it's exactly the kind of makerspace that gives administrators a heart attack over the year's budget. So would it surprise you to know that this space is almost entirely funded with community donations? And that due to limited library staff, it frequently relies on older, more experienced students to help out younger ones. I think it's a prime example of a craft space, a space wherein students may be provided structured assignments but have the freedom and resources to construct beyond expectations and effortlessly collaborate without bumping shoulders. But of course, this is not the only or even most common option. For many schools or libraries with concerns over space or cost, a miniature mobile makerspace has provided an appealing route. By putting shelving on wheels, you can cram all of the major elements we just discussed featured in the collaboratory into a vehicle that can transform any environment into a makerspace. You just wheel it in during a free period and voila, let people loose. For those who feel they can only afford a small section of the library, consider the table space. You place a selection of building materials, Lego, K'NEX, or Kava blocks. Kava blocks are the wooden structures you can see on the bottom image, along with some design suggestions on the table. And you can watch students just take challenges like build the tallest possible tower, or make a suspension bridge that can go between tables. And they just take those concepts further than you'd ever expect. Alternatively, you can provide weekly kits for a STEM club that promote a range of activities, and then students can even take their explorations home. Recall, the complexity of the projects is not the goal of the makerspace, but creating a culture that emphasizes the maker mindset is. And that can be accomplished with just this table. So stop me if you've heard this one before. Yes, we're returning to the image from earlier in order to illustrate our point that makerspaces can exist anywhere. After seeing how a few after-school STEM activities got kids so excited, librarian Diana Rendina wanted to bring a makerspace into her library. The problem was the entire library was considered occupied. However, as we can see in the left side image, a single corner in the library was fairly bare, save for a couple of tables, and we can see those computers over there as well. But through some space organization, including the repurposing of closet space, as you can see in the closet in the back, to store mobile units, mobile maker spaces, like the ones we discussed earlier, and installing whiteboards on the walls, Rendina was able to convert this previously unused area into a bustling makerspace. And only a year after the idea's conception and rollout, overall library visitation increased tenfold. And the students frequently would end up spending their free periods or lunch breaks just tinkering in the Stewart School makerspace. And all of this started with just a few bins of Lego and K'NEX that Rendina salvaged from the school's science room storage. They were just sitting there gathering dust. She put them out and then saw how excited and engaged it made kids in the creative process. So don't think that something small can't birth something larger than life. Almost any makerspace starts from humble beginnings and can develop over time. Don't be afraid to let the idea of oh my God, I have to get all these technologies together. Oh my God, I have to learn all this STEM research. No. Just get kids engaged with building and learning through crafts, and you will see growth over time. Of course, you as the librarian or an educator, you have to be a part of that growth, but the growth will come as long as you create the supportive environment. So to review, there are certain ideal conditions that you're going to want for a makerspace. You want the makerspace to be comfortable. People are going to be there for a very long period of time. They want to be able to sit down. They want to be able to maybe move around, stretch. over periods, or maybe they just want a couple of comfy chairs so they can brainstorm comfortably. You want your makerspace to be inviting. For little kids, that's going to mean multicolored bins. It's going to mean inviting signage. And in general, you want people to feel like they are free to explore without judgment. And then, of course, if you can have an open space, or at least a large enough space that people aren't going to be on top of each other, they're not going to be injuring each other with flying elbows, you want it to be as open as possible and with some natural lighting. Again, only if possible. You want to build out a makerspace. Makerspaces don't happen overnight. They take time, effort, and input from the community, from other teachers. It's a real community building exercise. So it's not going to happen overnight, and that's okay. But nothing's going to happen unless the materials get put out there in the first place. Recycle and restructure. There are spaces that are not going to be used in your school. It's just how it is. Maybe there's an empty classroom somewhere, or maybe there's a spot, as we saw in the Stewart Library, that you can use if you just move some stuff around in order to create a makerspace. And when it comes to materials, you also want to make sure to catalog what is available to you throughout the school. Maybe there's a storage spot that isn't being used, or maybe there's materials that another class or teacher isn't really using that can be used for your makerspace. Really go out and don't be afraid to kind of sniffle around, see if you can find some truffles here and there. No space is too small. As we've seen demonstrated in multiple ways, that you can have a full classroom space, you can have a very small space, you can have just a single table. There's no space reason that should discourage you from trying to build out a makerspace. And finally, that you're trying to cultivate a maker mindset. That it's not about the projects that you're throwing out there, it's about giving kids and students the freedom and availability to dream big, dream bigger, and inspire them to take on more creative, independent projects over time. Oftentimes, kids who get to experience makerspaces at a young age have a more independently minded, creatively minded approach down the line. So getting these engineering skills and qualities out early is really the best we can do as educators. So if anybody has any questions about the Makerspace, we're going to be, if you can line up over there, and we're going to be fielding and talking about what your guys' conceptions of Makerspace are, and maybe any questions that you have about materials or elements that you saw in the images that you thought were interesting. And then after that, we have some activities. If you look to the middle of your tables, there are some maker kits, because you won't be able to to demonstrate makerspaces without having experience with the kinds of materials that you'll be working with, and seeing what works for you, what activities you can dream up based on these. And then we'll all gather up around again and talk it out.